I got some nice pictures. All right, thanks. It's recording now? Yeah. Okay, good. Punishment. What we know it as today is you commit a crime and you get locked up, right? You go to jail. That's the only concept we know. But remember, historically, they didn't understand punishment. To them, punishment was literally hurting the individual, causing pain.
Flogging.
There you go. Flogging, beheading, taking limbs off if you stole, was it the letter A, if you're an adulterer or adulteress.
And in some cultures, they sacrifice you.
I mean, there was all kinds of crazy stuff happening, mostly in Europe. Don't know a lot about other third world countries during that era, but historically in Europe, it was hurting the individual physically, causing them pain. That was their idea of punishment. Okay, now remember, we developed the country. Our forefathers wanted to be a little more civilized, started thinking we could do better than hurting people. And then the idea of incarceration came up. But it had to be honed. And in the chapter, if you read through it, you're going to learn about the Walnut Walnut something, Pennsylvania silent system. They go over a lot of different types of systems. Penance. Okay, penance. If you were sentenced during that time, you were expected to be on your knees asking for forgiveness. Okay, penance, penitentiary. That's where it came from, to pay penance. Silent meant we would lock you all up and you couldn't speak to anyone unless somebody spoke to you, such as someone in authority. So you had to be silent. You were expected to work and work hard. I mean, it was rough back in the days, but it's evolved. We've gone through several different evolutions to get where we're at today. Personal opinion, we've gone too far to the left. Once it's a right that we have to provide better medical health benefits for those incarcerated than our elderly and our veterans, we've gone way too damn far. Quick example, if I'm an inmate and I'm locked up and I have a runny nose and I just don't feel good, I just write out a simple little request. It's on a little tablet they give every inmate. They want to see a doctor. They fill it out. The officers on third watch, when they pick up mail, usually between 5 and 6 o'clock, they walk the tiers, they hand out mail, they pick up mail. If an inmate wants to see the doc, they hand them the sick call slip. The officer has to take that slip, put them together, walk them down to the infirmary. They have a box there, they drop them in. The medical people evaluate those sick call slips, start scheduling appointments for the next day. An inmate must be seen within 24 hours by a doctor, not a PA, not a nurse, a doctor. When's the last time you tried to make a doctor's appointment? Okay, so you get my point, right?
Through the
It takes
VA?
weeks. Yeah, that's why VA, forget it. You guys even have it worse.
2 months.
It's ridiculous. Okay, but that's where we're at. The pendulum is starting to swing back, where they're starting to eliminate some of those extra nice things. We want them to understand they've done something wrong. That's why you're doing time. That's the whole idea. Also remember, the punishment part of incarceration is being incarcerated. That's it, removed from society, removed from their loved ones, and placed in a confined area. That's the punishment. So if you ever work as an officer and you're in a jail or in a prison, it's not your job to abuse these people. Okay, I've had officers work for me, they thought that was their job, to treat these people like, there's just say they treated them very poorly, denying them things they had coming, their issue, because they're an inmate. Okay, that's bull. Okay, that's not what it's about. They're there, that's the punishment. It's not your job to cause them any further punishment or pain. Okay, that's a point I want to make clear. All right, so the history, I kind of jumped ahead, but you kind of get it. It's evolved to where we're at now. Middle Ages, okay, physical tortures, the whipping, the branding, you get it. That's where they were at before. Development of the common law around 11th century, that's back in England, and our laws are still based on common law that we inherited from England. The end of the 16th century, most offenders were sentenced to do hard labor. There's a movie called Brubaker. Okay, if I had more time in the class, we'd actually watch that film. It's that good. Brubaker, anybody familiar with it? Based on a true story. But Robert Redford does an awesome job of bringing it to life. These books used to have Brubaker in them, but I think they've edited that story out. This guy was appointed as warden, and I want to say it was Georgia, Alabama, something like that, this South. He goes in, not as warden, he goes in undercover as an inmate because he's heard of the abuse they've done to these people. So he goes in undercover, and he witnesses the abuse. So he pledges reform. It's a really good movie because he's locked up and he's telling the guard, take me to see your warden. Because you're an inmate, shut up. You know, the guard's arguing with him. I'm telling you, you better take me now. And they took him serious enough, they actually escorted him. And he took over the job right there on the spot. He fired the warden, says, you're out of here. And the officer's jaws hit the floor. This inmate is now our boss. So it's a really good movie. All right, so hard labor. What they were doing back then, these inmates that were sentenced to do hard labor, the prisons were farming out that hard labor and profiting from it. Okay, yeah, not the prison, the individuals and politicians were lining their pockets. Anytime there's an opportunity, corruption isn't too far behind. And that's exactly what happened. So the reform era comes through. They want to clean up these prisons. They want to establish decent living standards. 1978 in California, Ruth versus Russian. Okay, that and Toussaint versus Russian, the name of the case. 78 is when the Supreme Court heard it, and it has to do with prison conditions based on the 8th Amendment. I come along in 82 as an officer. I'm in the prison in 82, nothing has been changed based on what the court order said. I spent about a couple of years working in the main line, then I go into the hole, lock 'em. In the hole is where Toussaint really has a lot of leverage. Tells us we're supposed to give these people a hot meal. We're supposed to allow them to shower. We're supposed to have running water in the cell. And a light. That was the end of the world. What the hell do you mean I gotta give them a light bulb? They did. We never did it. Hell, they're an inmate. Literally put them in a dark ass hole. Their living quarters, imagine a bunk about this big, lower to the ground, cement. No pillows, no mattresses, no blankets. The toilet was a hole in the floor. There was a sink on the wall when we turned on the water when we felt like it. Pretty good. I thought it was good. Toussaint didn't agree. They said, nope, you gotta give them mattresses, you gotta give them pillows. You gotta give them light, you gotta give them running water. And you have to put a toilet in there. Hindsight, looking back now, they were absolutely right. What we were doing wasn't humane. It was wrong. But in the moment, I thought it was the end of my world. That these prisoners get all these luxuries, running water. So we can't do that. You have to treat them like human beings. They're locked up, that is the punishment. In England, a little bit more. This PowerPoint is going to be posted. What's in Canvas now is not this one. But I will uplink this PowerPoint along with the recording. So you can go back and take notes if you want to regarding these dates. I want to get to this slide. This slide here. The objectives of criminal sentencing. You have to know this. And I'm going to break them down individually. But this is a snapshot of what we're going to talk about. General deterrence, and there's specific deterrence, incapacitation, rehab or just deserts, restitution, diversion, equity, restoration. We're going to go over all of those, time permitting. Starting with general deterrence. General deterrence is a form of punishment that we issue a sentence that's not only intended to the offender, but also to have an impact of those with similar ideas. Case in point, I take somebody's life. Okay, I'm a murderer. We don't want people to be murderers. So they're going to sentence me to the death penalty, maybe, or to life in prison without the possibility of parole, to set an example for others thinking about committing a murder. They're going to look at my punishment and say, nah, I don't want no part of that. I'm all right. I'll just maim them, but I won't kill them. Okay, maybe. But at least it's a deterrent. Okay, get the point. The sentence is not only intended for the offender, but also to have an impact on others. Okay? Incapacitation, real simple. That's prison. We're locking them up. Taking away the key type of deal. What else we got? It does say diminishing effects over time. I think we're already there. It used to be, if somebody went to prison, they were labeled for life. They come out in society, they were considered a leper. Nobody wanted anything to do with them. Nowadays, I'll prove my point. Anybody who knows somebody that's done time, friend, family, whatever, you just know somebody that's done time, raise your hand, please. About half the class. If I would have asked that question 20 years ago, maybe one hand would have went up. If that. We've become complacent now. It's common to see someone offend, go to prison, and come out. It shouldn't be like that. Okay, and hopefully that will change. But it does have a diminishing effect. Offenders don't fear going to prison. They just really don't. Specific deterrence. We talked about general deterrence, that it's not only intended for the offender, but also for others. Specific's just the opposite. It only intends to affect the offender. That's it. We don't want it affecting anyone else. It's specifically intended for the offender. But you have to know those two. Deterrence, and there's two of them, specific and general. You'll see that in the quiz, and you'll see it in your final. It will continue to pop up. So get it down pat now. Retribution or just desert. The punishment should fit the crime. That was the ideology back in the good old days in Europe in the Middle Ages, that if somebody stole something, they'd cut off their arm because that's what they deserved. I don't think eye for an eye is up there, but kind of the same mentality. An eye for an eye. You cause me harm, I'm going to cause you the same kind of harm. That's retribution. Rehabilitation is to modify the behavior, to help the individual. You see a lot of this with drug offenses. Yes, they're a bad person because they committed a crime, but no, it's not their fault because there's something wrong with them. We got to fix it. We can rehabilitate them. We went through that, and we're just coming out of that era. Started about 1990 when we started with the substance abuse treatment programs. I was part of the pilot program when it first started in 1990. Now we have prisons dedicated to substance abuse treatment, hospitals, just substance abuse treatment, and it's for rehabilitation. Proper treatment will prevent future crimes. That's the idea. If you treat the cause, the reason why they're offending, they won't offend anymore. I like that idea, but it costs a lot of money. Diversion programs. It's still the sentence, but it's an option. That if you're willing to go to maybe a substance abuse treatment facility, we'll be more lenient in your sentence. Something other than the full penalty. Diverted to a community correctional program for treatment. So something other. I'm sentenced to jail. Okay, let's say I gotta go to jail for 2 years. But the judge knows I work, I just have a drinking problem. Maybe a little bit of a substance abuse problem. I have a home, I have a job, I have a family. The judge talks to me and says, you know, if you clean up your act and continue to work and stop drinking and taking drugs, I'll let you do your time, but you can come out in the morning, go to work, you can go visit with your family in the evening, but you have to be locked up by 8 o'clock every night. And maybe just spend one day a weekend locked up, the other day you could spend with your family. They come up with a special type of a plan for the offender. That's sort of what diversion is about. Still, we don't have time for this one right now. Equity and restitution, the goal is to make sure you're sentencing the offender to a proper type of a punishment, but also, what are we going to do for the victim? Okay, how are we going to compensate the victim for their loss? And it says, seeks to compensate individual victims and the general society for their loss due to the crime. You see alternate sentencing, and I think we'll talk about that in a little bit. Instead of just locking this person up and having them sit in a cell and waste their life away, maybe put them to work somewhere. We used to have, we called them chain gangs, but they were really chain gangs, out in the middle of the freeways picking up garbage. You don't see it that often anymore. We had crews that used to go to schools during the summer and paint them. Right? The school bought the paint, we supplied all the labor. It worked pretty good. And these inmates are learning a skill while paying the debt back to society, making it cleaner for the community and painting buildings. Not a bad deal, but it costs money. Restoration. Defendants may be asked to confront their behavior, the damage they caused the victim, and the shame they brought to their families, friends, and community. Okay. Restoration. The focus on restoration is on the victim, to make the victim whole again, as they were before the crime. You see a lot of restoration in civil law, not so much in criminal, but in civil court, restoration is the primary focus. Keep in mind, somebody causes you harm to the tune of $100,000. You lost. Do you want that individual sitting in a cell for 10 years? Or would you rather them have some opportunity to repay that debt? Well, hell yeah, we're gonna want our money back. Yeah, we want our money back. So restoration does have an important role in the criminal justice, but more important in the civil court. In criminal court, the focus is punishment, incarceration, probation, something. We're gonna do something to them. But there's also another little caveat there to compensate the victim. So they broke into your home. They stole all your things. Caused you, I don't know, $1,000 in damages on the door. You lost $10,000 worth of goods. You want your money back. So you're going to petition the court. When you sentence this individual, I want to recover the money I lost, $11,000. The judge could order it and say, okay, on top of all these things, fines and penalties, I'm going to assess $11,000 to be paid back to the victim to compensate them for their losses. It's ordered. You have that in your hand. You might as well wipe yourself with it because that's about all it's good for. What are the odds you're going to ever see that money from this victim, or the offender? Slim to none, guys. And I've been in court where these guys come in with their paperwork saying, but you ordered it, judge. You said they had to pay me. The judge says, I can't squeeze blood from a stone. It's up to you. The burden falls back to the victim to collect. I don't like that, but that's just the way it is. Bless you. And that's true also in civil proceedings. Okay, imposing the sentences, you have to know this. Concurrent and consecutive. You need to know what those terms mean. Concurrent. You're serving the sentences at the same time. Consecutive, you're serving one after the other. When a person is charged, they're usually charged for multiple crimes. We'll go back to the invasion, the home invasion. They broke the door, they caused $10,000 worth of damage. Maybe the home was occupied. They also stole your car. They ran over stop signs. They defaced public property. So all of these are separate crimes. They roll them up, and then the judge is going to say, I sentence this individual to 5 years state time for offense number 1, which was the home invasion. On sentence number 2, which was the actual theft, another 2 years. For defacing property, another year, and 1 year for all the other offenses. So when you total it up, there's 10 years there. If they're done consecutive, the offender's doing all 10 years. If they're done concurrent, only the first offense, the first 5 years, is the primary. The other 5 years that were because of the other offenses are all done at the same time. So this offender's only going to do 5 max. Probably be out in 2. So you're being sentenced to a crime. You want consecutive or do you want concurrent?
Concurrent.
It's a no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
That's another thing they do during plea bargaining. The DA can play with that. Say, well, you know, I'm not going to take time, but I will allow the sentence to be ran concurrent. Tell your client that. Sometimes that's enough motivation to get them to take the plea. You have to know that. And the last one up there is effective good time. That's it used to be day for day, but people were offended by it, and it went down to truth in sentencing law. They have to do at least 60%, I think, of their time, or 70%. Read up in the book. Just understand that we're talking effective good time is that for every day this individual is incarcerated, they get time off their sentence. How much time just depends under the sentencing law. Used to be day for day. Okay, so every day served, they get a day knocked off their sentence. And the day served has to be clean time. It can't be they're out there being stupid, getting disciplinary reports. Okay, they lose that good time, and it gets added back to the sentence. We'll talk more about good time if you need more on it, okay? Imposing. This is the good stuff. I talked about the consecutive and the concurrent. If you don't quite understand it yet, please go to this slide or look it up in your textbook. But this is a good example of the differences when we're imposing a sentence. Sentencing, okay, intermediate and determinate sentencing. You might not even know what it means, but to me, this was the worst thing that ever happened. We used to sentence offenders under indeterminate sentence. But man, that was that when an offender was locked up, the judge had all the authority. He could sentence this violator 5 years to life, 10 years to life, 2 years to life. That's the way it was done under indeterminate. But what that did, it gave the prison the power, gave the board of prison board all the authority to determine a release date for this offender. So they would do their 2 years, go before the board. The board would review everything this person's done, and then say, come back and see me next year. I want you to do this, and I want you to do this. So they were accountable for their actions. The board is the one that determined. These guys are experts. Now we're under determinate sentencing, and it's legislature controlling it. A bunch of pencil pushers in Sacramento. In the penal code, if you look up an offense, you'll find that there's 3 versions of the penalty. The expected term, mitigated, and the aggravated. The expected term, maybe it's a 3-year term for this offense. But there's other issues, so they're going to aggravate it to 4 years. Or maybe it was not that big a deal. They'll mitigate it down to maybe only 2 years. But the judge's hands are tied. That's all the latitude they get. As before, with the indeterminate, the judge had all the power. Sacramento effectively stole that from them. And we didn't do a damn thing about it. That's where we're at right now. And as soon as they did that, the prison population went through the roof. Because the board couldn't control the population like they used to. If the prison was getting too full, they had lower level offenders. They already had them lined up. They'd come in, review a bunch of files, kick out 20. Because they knew there was a bus coming in with another 20. But when Sacramento took that from them, our prisons went through the roof. We went from 12 to 33. That's a lot. Sentencing models. This is just something that the court uses. It's called the PSI, Pre-Sentencing Investigative Report. They use probation office to do an investigation on the individual before they're sentenced. They go in, they talk to neighbors, everything this person's done in their life. Then the judge gets to review it. And think about it. Do I want to aggravate the term? Do I want to mitigate the term? But it gives them something to go off of, to be specific to the offender. They consider prior records, current offenses, drug related. Is it to further gang activity? There's so much that goes into sentencing. Mandatory, that's what's fixed by the penal code. Says if you're found guilty of this crime, you must serve at least this amount of prison time. Fixed prison sentence for certain times. Chronic recidivists, these are the people that revolving door. They offend, they release, they reoffend, they go back to prison, they're released, and it's just a revolving door. 3 strikes intent was to stop that revolving door, and it did a pretty good job with it. Limits judicial discretion, like I mentioned before. They took all the power from the judge, gave it to the pencil pushers. 3 strikes law, I kind of talked about it. You heard me talk about truth in sentencing. There it is. If you need more information, it's on the PowerPoint. It's also in your textbook. I don't want that one. And then how people are sentenced. What factors? You're the judge. What are you going to consider when you're sentencing this individual? What's going to go through your mind? The severity. What is the crime? Was anybody hurt? What's the level of loss? The offender used violence. The crime was committed for money. Was it gang related, drug related? All of these things need to be taken into consideration. What social factors affect the sentencing? Social, gender, age, victim or victimless crimes, and then of course the race. Is sentencing fair? No. Is the criminal justice system fair? No. You gotta face reality, guys. If you're a male, and if you're white, and if you come from means, if you have money, wealth, you're going to get a more lenient court. You're going to get a more lenient sentence. Just the way it is. And if anybody wants to debate that, bring it on. I've looked into this so many times. I've sat in courtrooms and witnessed it. And it's disgusting, but that's what happens. Capital punishment. Are you for it? Or are you against it? Should we use capital punishment? I see bobbleheads. I see you going, yeah. I used to get a lot of bobbleheads. Capital punishment. Death penalty. Good or bad? Who thinks it's okay that we have a death penalty? Show of hands, please. Okay. Who's opposed to the death penalty? Show of hands. You think it's wrong? Okay. Thank you. The majority seems to think it's okay. The minority thinks it's wrong. Why do you think it's wrong?
I mean, like you said, it just costs way too much money. It takes way
It
too
costs so
long.
much money. It's so expensive.
They get sentenced and you wait 10, 20 years and they just die in the cell anyway.
The most common cause of death for death row inmates, natural causes. That's sad. Your reasons? You said, yeah, you had
I feel like it's kind of the cheap way out. I feel like in a way it's more torture to be locked up in a cell where you don't know what's gonna happen to you. You don't know if you're gonna get stabbed in there.
No.
You're paranoid the whole time. And being stuck in there for the next few years, that's more torture for that person than just dying in a way. I feel.
Yeah, it could be, yeah.
So kind of to address that, I think a form of capital punishment is better. I think how recently they tested out the nitrogen gas thing, and a lot of people are opposed to it because it looked like he was suffering when he was dying, which I personally agree with. Because if he's on death row, obviously, he should suffer while he's dying and stuff like that. So
Agreed, I agree.
So I think that's the worst form of punishment. So they know that they're not going to get to die peacefully.
Yeah, it's not, let me go over here. You had a comment?
For religious beliefs, I don't think that,
Okay.
you should have control.
Nobody
of,
has a right to take a life.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I've heard that argument too. Yeah.
So, on what you said, there's a problem with that. Even in the military, we're taught that we have to treat any wounded. Doesn't matter if it's friend or foe. So, it doesn't matter, I do agree there should be some form of capital punishment, but it needs to be humane.
Okay. Okay, yeah.
I disagree. Why should that person have to be put down humanely rather than in a way of torture if they went and murdered and raped somebody in a tortured way?
Okay, what we got here, guys, I'm going to bring it back to what we were talking about. You believe more in retribution, eye for an eye, and you just want the punishment part of it. Okay, so here it is, what we talked about at work. Differences of opinion. I want that blood. He caused them pain like they caused their victim. I like that. I like that. I don't agree with the death penalty. I hate the death penalty because of the costs. Okay, I worked death row. I witnessed, I was part of 2 executions. And I'm still against it because we don't use it enough. In the back, Chance?
Why don't we just shoot them? I
It's so much easier.
It's just like, it's so expensive and just one single shot. I mean, we have slaughterhouses with those little air guns for cows. I mean, you could do it.
We
to
can kill a
person.
cow, but these people have rights. You and then.
I would say on the regards to cost,
Yeah.
yes, there should be a capital punishment, but if you receive the capital punishment, your sentence should be shortened.
Yes.
So to reduce cost.
To
It's-
use it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
to
it's
use- we're gonna
ridiculous that
have
they
it,
keep
use the
people in
damn
there
thing. Exactly.
for so long
Yeah.
that are on death row, but
It's a
we
joke.
don't.
Okay,
use
I'm
it.
telling you, I talked to these guys. It's a joke.
Why
They're
does it
they're on
take
death
so
row
long?
because of the appeals process.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I kind of agree, like 5 years max for the appeal process, and if not, they go.
I met my wife. She was an officer in San Quentin. Right? So we have these conversations, and her idea was, as soon as they're sentenced to death from the court, she said, take them out back. Bam, put them out of their misery. Oh boy, and she's the most gentle person you're ever gonna meet. Yeah. I still sleep with one eye open. Go ahead.
Regarding that, like the gas and injection,
Yeah.
the reason they do that also is it doesn't leave no impact of a person that's causing that death. If you've never shot nobody
Mhm.
or killed someone, you shouldn't speak on shooting.
Nope.
guns
And
away.
that's why I brought
That's
up
the stupidest.
treating
Yeah.
friend and foe alike.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, that's the military. What do they call it? You have your orders to do certain things. Yeah, I'll think of the term in a minute. Yeah.
So wouldn't like a middle ground be something similar to what they're doing in El
Middle
Salvador?
ground?
Yeah, like a middle ground.
Oh yeah.
Be something like what they're doing in El Salvador, with the prison, how they dropped their crime rates to I think less than 1% now. Basically, one of the most dangerous countries now is one of the safest, because they started locking them up and started not giving them mattresses,
Yeah.
not feeding them properly and stuff like that. So wouldn't that be like a nice middle ground?
Kind of, but remember the courts are all involved. I told you guys about Tucson, telling us the courts are intervening on so many issues that happen inside the prison. When they were happening, I was against it. But now that I look back, they were absolutely right. We were doing some pretty rotten things in there that we should have been doing.
So remember how you said before, not everybody's guilty either. Some people are in there innocent. So if that blanket treatment.
In theory, yes. But according to the court, everybody is guilty because they were sentenced. But yeah, I know, especially with plea bargaining. They only took the plea because of the plea, the deal, but they didn't commit the crime. So yeah, I kind of get that too. But specifically to the death penalty, I told you I was part of two. One was lethal injection, the other was the gas. Okay, and the gas, the individual did suffer. Okay, he did flip and flop and he struggled. Then he finally succumbed and he was done. Lethal injection, the guy, in my opinion, should have been gassed. He was an ass. This guy was terrible. He just closed his eyes and went to sleep. You ever put a pet down through lethal? Okay, it's the hardest thing to do because it's a loved one. Okay, I've had to do it a couple times more than I care to admit. And it's the hardest thing I had to do. It's humane. The courts are still arguing whether it's humane for a death penalty. I've witnessed it on animals and in a human being. I still can't see the argument against it. Other than if you're just totally opposed to taking the life, then I get that part. Okay, so death penalty, you gotta know why it's imposed, how it's imposed. It is a general deterrence penalty because you don't want others committing these types of crimes for fear of the death penalty. Does it actually work? I don't know. Here are pros and cons. This was the pros here, and these are the cons against the death penalty. So if you need the information, please check it out. Your textbook is a good resource. And that's all I have for you. Thank you for coming today. Have a good rest of your week.
yeah, I'm gonna leave this here.